We're here to talk a bit about the .NET MicroFramework and a specific implementation of it called the .NET Gadgeteer. How many of you have an electronics background? Wow. All right. So any of you who wants to actually come up and do the talk, my background is computer science. So when I do stuff with electronics, it's like, you know when you've got that new person at work and they just learned how to program and you look at their code, you're like, oh my God, that's the worst. That's what my electronics is like. So for all the rest
and I'm even worse because I've got a music and theater background. So it's very interesting. Feel free to correct us. Tell us that we're saying something that's stupid. Any of the above is fun.
Right.
It's all in fun.
Yes, please. So we're here to talk about this stuff, and it's the nice thing about what we're going to talk about is it is geared towards getting developers involved in more electronics things. Like you don't need the electronics background, but you will gather or you will develop an electronics background over the course of time. So it's kind of like on the hobby training type stuff. Everything that we're going to show here is available today and is something that you can go out and buy yourself or whatever you'd like. How many of you have experimented with .NET MicroFramework? One other person. Okay. All the rest of you are just... How many of you have messed around with Arduino? Okay, a couple of people from the enemy in here.
How about the Radio Shack thing? You can like put the resistors together. Does that count?
That totally counts if you're 10. Yes. No, actually, that's fun. That's with all those springs on it that you can. Yeah. Much like that, you generally can't kill yourself with the electronics that are going to work here. But I think for the folks who do have an electronics background, you know that the real work comes when you start hooking up the mains voltage, and there's some life or death challenges involved.
So how many of you who have electronics experience have experienced releasing the magic smoke? Okay, good. Good. Okay, good. So we'll have plenty of sympathy votes if we do something really bad.
We're going to try not to let it smoke here, but there are no guarantees. So for those of you who don't know us, my name is Pete Brown. This is Andrew Duthie. We both work at Microsoft, although Andrew's done it for a lot longer than I have. So like kind of respective Kool-Aid levels are around here for Andrew, but they're still somewhat lower for me. So. So Andrew's going to spout for you all the corporate line stuff, and then I'm going to tell you how it really works. Actually, I kind of blame Andrew for getting me to join Microsoft to begin with. So, and I'm still not sure if that's a good blame or.
So he blames me, but then he talks about how he's got the best job in the world.
So I run the. It sounds so lofty, but now it's one direct report. So I run the community team out of Developer Guidance Spec. In corporate, but I work out of my house, which I think is a pretty good deal. And you?
So I'm a developer evangelist. That means I'm sort of responsible for the care and feeding to developers throughout Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and DC. I am here locally in Leesburg. I think that means that you've got a shorter commute here than I do.
Yes, I'm 40 minutes from here. I live out in Annapolis. Our scope is a little different, but we do tend to have fun doing things like this. So, the .NET MicroFramework. The .NET MicroFramework is a way to code for microcontrollers. Now, what's a microcontroller? The definition of these is blurring a lot because the definition between a microcontroller and a CPU is getting harder and harder to understand. But in essence, and all the EE type folks, just block your ears while I totally bastardize the distinction here. In essence, a microcontroller is a relatively low-powered processor that sits on anything that you want, but in these cases they're going to be on developer boards. Typically has some amount of memory built into it, typically has some amount of program storage built into it. So it's not quite system on a chip, but it's along the way of system on a chip. You can code for these things using assembly, you can code for them using C, and then what we're going to talk about today, you can code for them using the .NET MicroFramework in Visual Studio 2010. There are lots of different types of microcontrollers. So there are some that are in my unopenable pink box. Here we go. There are some that use what's called an Arduino form factor, which is this. All right, yeah.
It's upside down.
All right, good. Because the bits all fall to the bottom and it's upside down. So this is what's called the Netmfdevices, which is a board that allows you to run the .NET MicroFramework. Yeah, thanks. which enables you to run .NET code on here. It has a number of pins. All these little blue things here are inputs and outputs that you can use to control other devices. By themselves, the microcontrollers can't do a whole lot, right? But when you combine them with, say, like other things like LEDs or like garage door openers, with robots, with people who are operating aquariums and all sorts of other crazy things like that, they can do quite a lot because they can be the brains of a product that you develop either for your own hobby use or for commercial use.
Electrodes.
Electrodes, yes, you can hook electrodes up to some of these things, so who knows what you can do with a good set of electrodes.
For measuring.
Yes, for
Input,
measuring.
not output.
Yes, okay. Yes.
What were you thinking?
I don't know what I was thinking. I was thinking about new management techniques, actually. So, so the Arduino form factor, what this is, I differentiate this from Arduino itself, which has its own language and voltage requirements and a bunch of other stuff. The Arduino form factor is essentially this shape and these pins, which enable you to connect up what are called shields. For example, this is a MIDI shield here, which has, you see those? Inputs and outputs for MIDI. And then underneath it, it has a bunch of pins you can see that actually go in and connect like this, right? So they snap together. And then you can code for that, and you have the connections automatically. So this has been, for a while, the most popular form factor available for .NET MicroFramework and for kind of any other devices. There's a new form factor that has come out on the Microsoft side called the .NET Gadgeteer. And what the Gadgeteer is, which we'll cover more here in a moment, the Gadgeteer, besides being a giant wooden board, that is scarily hanging off the table here. What the Gadgeteer is here is our microcontroller. It's actually the chip and stuff is on the underside of this board. That is our main board with the microcontroller on it, and instead of using pins and that socket layout that we had for the Arduino style, we have these standardized connections, right? And we use this to connect up to all different kinds of modules. Those modules, which we'll talk about in a second here, are designed to help you avoid letting out the magic blue smoke. It won't always guarantee to do that for you, but it does help quite a bit, and it makes it more accessible, and there are already tons of modules and stuff developed, but we'll go more into that very shortly. There are a couple different ways that you can code for these. You can use the free version of Visual C#, so if you don't have Visual Studio 2010, you don't have to spend money to go and do it. These Arduino style boards here cost anywhere from $20 to $50, $60, depending upon the features. This particular one doesn't have Ethernet or anything on it, but if you have one that has Ethernet and stuff, it tends to raise the price of excess, have controller chips and whatnot, right? There's a different complexity for it. The Gadgeteer system, the main board itself, which would be equivalent to that, the main board itself was
$119, I think.
like $119, $120, something along those lines. Immediately everybody's like, forget this for a hobby. Trust me, you'll be able to find a way to use this for work, right? It's about $120, and then to get all the additional stuff, you can buy it as a kit, which runs around $250, but understand that you're getting a lot more than just like a simple microcontroller, okay? And the kits vary by vendor, and again, we'll discuss more of that here in a little bit. You use Visual Studio 2010, like I said, to code this. C# is the only language you can use for the .NET MicroFramework 4.1. Any VB developers in the room? Besides Andrew? That's one person. You guys,
I'm willing to admit it.
You guys are so funny. You didn't want to raise your hand until Andrew went and gave one up, and then you were
Hey, for it.
Nice. Well, now we can also actually shock your landlord with other cool things too. So you can use Visual Basic with MicroFramework Release 4.2, which isn't on most of these boards yet, because it was just very recently released. Now, a really cool thing about the MicroFramework is while Microsoft drives it and did the initial development and everything for it, it is 100% open source, right? The .NET MicroFramework is Apache licensed. Anybody who has a board or creates a hardware for it can do what's called a port by using this porting kit, which they can port all of that native code that makes up the MicroFramework to their own processor and their own development boards. and they can create their own devices from that.
And not only is it open source, but the .NET MicroFramework team has already taken contributions from the community. So there's already community written code that's in the .NET MicroFramework today. So it's the kind of thing where it's not just about, oh, this is open and you can look at it. It's, this is open and we're taking seriously the idea that the community has a role in developing this platform.
Let's say you make a really cool, device or robotic toy or whatever, you want to sell it. Do you need to open source your code for that with the Apache license, or how does it work?
I'd have to double check the Apache license, but I don't think it's viral by inside like the. Fine, not the word to use, but like the GNU stuff, right? Where, well, no, some of the other open source licenses are designed specifically to make sure that if you do anything using that license, that everything else also uses that license. I don't believe Apache falls under that.
But that being said, best to get
we're
advice of a lawyer. We're not good at interpreting.
I told you, he's here to cover my corporate behind on these. And so there are lots of different people.
Make sure you don't get me in.
Yeah, there are lots of different people or companies who have ported to different platforms, and so it is an open standard that can be used, right?